It is 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on this Wednesday, July 25th, so thankfully we are already halfway through the week and looking forward to the weekend, and the good news is that there are no imminent tropical threats. As you can see from the latest Hurricane Center outlook, the one non-tropical low that they were monitoring in the far northern Atlantic is not only moving out to sea, but it's also beginning to dissipate, and the same can be said for this tropical disturbance located well out into the Pacific Ocean. The latest surface analysis shows that the Gulf of Mexico is being dominated by an area of surface high pressure, so there are no tropical threats to the south of the United States at this time. And there's also a tropical wave passing to the south of Cuba, but conditions are not favorable. And there's a second tropical wave near 40 degrees west longitude, but it is completely surrounded by dry air. And finally, we are dealing with a tropical wave and associated 1011 millibar surface low to the south of the Cape Verde Islands. More on that in just a moment. But first we will begin our daily satellite tour closer to home, and as you can see there's really not much in the Gulf other than some isolated shower activity to the south of Apalachicola and Tallahassee, and much of this activity is related to a mid to upper level trough which is not tropical. We can also see a very long wave trough across the western Atlantic. Again, this is not tropical either. And finally we've got this tropical wave near Central America, but it's moving westward, and as we see on the water vapor it's being surrounded by dry air. And the same can be said for this tropical wave that you can hardly even make out on the latest water vapor, but perhaps you can see it a little bit better here approaching the Lesser Antilles, but there's really not much associated with it. This isn't saying much, but the most interesting feature on the maps today remains this tropical wave located to the southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, and as we saw on the surface analysis, there is a very weak 1011 millibar surface low associated with it. And on the latest standard infrared you can make out the mid-level circulation associated with this weak area of low pressure, but convection is lacking especially within the northern semicircle, and that is because it is being encountered by a lot of dry air that is filtering in from northern Africa and the north central Atlantic, so we're not expecting any development whatsoever in the near future. And what you're now viewing on the latest water vapor animation is a common sight for mid to late July. You see a lot of dry air being filtered into the deep tropics out ahead of this tropical wave, and you've also got the periodic upper level low that decides to drop south, which will help to generate more westerly wind shear. So dry air should keep this tropical wave in check with no development for at least the next 4 to 5 days, and the wave is also likely to encounter more in the way of westerly wind shear once it gets out into the central Atlantic. But this time of the year, any tropical wave that does make it into the western half of the Atlantic basin, that including the Caribbean, West Atlantic, or Gulf of Mexico, it has to be monitored. And as you can see, the latest 6-day and 7-day forecast from the GFS does take more of this theta E low-level energy into the Caribbean and West Atlantic, so this wave axis will be something that we continue to follow for at least the next 7 to 8 days. We should also mention, however, that the ECMWF is still suggesting a slightly more northern track from the tropical wave, and you can see this as we go into days 3 and 4. At this point, the tropical wave is still located to the east of the Lesser Antilles, but as we go into days 5 through 7, it's beginning to bypass the Caribbean and move more so into the West Atlantic. Now, development could still occur out in the West Atlantic, but such a more northerly track also makes it more prone to recurvature, or at least getting drawn out by westerly winds aloft, especially if we've got troughing that persists near the eastern seaboard at around this time. But again, anything beyond 5 to 6 days is a lot of speculation. And finally, from a basin-wide development standpoint, conditions overall are still unfavorable across the Atlantic Basin. As you can see, much of this region of the globe is being dominated by a lot of downward sinking motion, which is enhancing a lot of that dry air that we are seeing on water vapor imagery, and all of the main tropical action remains out across the western Pacific. In fact, a typhoon made landfall just to the south of Hong Kong within the last 48 hours. And eventually this activity will begin to spread into the eastern Pacific and Atlantic once again, but it's going to take some time in doing so, and it's more than likely going to arrive sometime in early August, but it's not uncommon for a brief minimal system to develop even in a downward motion pulse. So we're going to gradually see an uptick in activity. If it's not within the next 7 to 10 days, it'll definitely come by early August, and for all we know it could be from that first tropical wave near the coast of Africa. But if not, it looks as though there will be more threats coming up rather quickly after that as we head into early next month. But as always, you can keep up with the latest updates from 28storms.com on our website or on Facebook and Twitter. And if that's not enough, you can check out all of our video analysis for the tropics and that's available on the go with the Hurricane Tracker app.